This is Keyed In with Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. And now, here are your hosts, Max Rabin and Brent Jackson.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Keyed In podcast. I'm Max Rabin.
And I'm Brent Jackson.
So today we don't have a guest, and it's just going to be you and me talking about one topic. Do not go off topic, please. No sports.
No Pam and Tommy.
Jesus, no. No, we just want to talk about multiple offer situations, because with the market that we have right now, we have low inventory and super high demand. I don't know if you've seen this on any of your listings. Have you seen lines of people at your open houses, like trying to get in? Have you seen this?
We've had lines at a few of them, not all of them. I don't know if it was here or somewhere. There was like a line of cars for people to get in,
right,
directing traffic. Have you?
Not on any of my listings, but our friend Jamie Manning, who is on the show, she's been posting some videos. She's been going to open houses for her Instagram content, and everywhere she goes, it seems like there's a line. So that should tell you a little bit about the high demand. So obviously this leads to multiple offers, more than one offer, more than two offers on a lot of these listings. So we just want to talk about the multiple offer situation in general, and how that plays out, and what are strategies for the consumer in a multiple offer situation. Now, so this is more, I guess it could be geared towards the agents that listen to us, but it's also geared towards the consumer who's looking to how to try to get an extra edge. Sometimes there are extra things you can do. Sometimes there aren't. Sometimes someone's just going to blow you out of the water. So I'm going to start with one thing about multiple offers and just say that your agent that you work with is an advantage, right?
Absolutely.
So when you are the listing agent, Brent, and you are expecting multiple offers, and so you get a call from, I'm not going to name any names, I'm just going to say like Realtor A, Realtor B, Realtor C. They're all asking you, can I have the disclosures? Do you have multiple offers? Can we schedule a pre-inspection? We'll get to that in a second. Who calls you is important, because you have done business with hundreds of other realtors in this area. So when someone calls you and says, hey, I'm Realtor A with such and such brokerage, if you have a past experience working with that agent, you're already thinking like, wow, I would hope to have the same kind of experience with that agent again if it was a good experience. Some agents, and again, like most of the agents, I would say vast majority of the agents we work with are extreme awesome professionals. But every once in a while you have a deal where something goes south, and maybe it's out of the agent's control.
I always blame the agent.
Always blame the agent. But that's what I'm saying, is like the agent gets the blame. That's why we do what we do.
Exactly.
So that the consumer, they can always say it's your fault. That's literally our job.
Yes.
But the agent you work with, and your confidence in the agent, and knowing their book of business, and knowing how many times they've done this, knowing their relationships. If you're a consumer looking to get into these multiple offer situations, you want to work with someone who has the experience.
No, absolutely. I think experience is key. And I had a first-time home buyer, called this morning, and that's exactly what we talked about, right? If you have apples to apples on an offer, no contingencies, everything's exactly the same, what's going to get you over that hump is usually the buyer agent. Open dialogue. They know your track record. They know you're going to get it from start to finish and all the way through escrow. That goes a very long way versus Realtor A that might just be driving the price up and the deal falls apart in the last hour.
It's happened.
Yes.
Definitely. So, and you also, just on that topic, you as the listing agent, when you're receiving these multiple offers and you're talking to your seller client, I don't know about you, but I'm sure you're also going to mention, like, this is coming from this agent. I've had great experiences with this agent. There's going to be no BS here, versus like offer B, which might be very close or even a little higher, depending on the situation.
Right.
Yeah, those are all very important factors.
So I'm going to throw a couple of scenarios at you as a listing agent, because you have a great property. Let's say it's a house in Capitol Hill, just comes on the market. When do you set the expectation with the other agents?
In terms of?
An offer deadline.
Oh, we'll get to that. That's actually...
I'm jumping.
Yes, you're jumping ahead. But definitely we'll talk about the offer deadline and how that can fluctuate, because that's been a little weird lately.
That's very weird.
But I also wanted to say, like, sort of part B to that first point was your lender. If you're getting a mortgage, is also your partner,
Yes.
right? You go ahead.
No, you've got to have a good lender. That's the same question that buyer asked me this morning. I was like, I've got this, Chase Bank lender out in Portland, Oregon. I'm like, that's not going to work.
It ain't gonna fly.
Right. And I think some of your seasoned agents, like I told him, I'm like, I'm not writing the offer with a Chase Bank from Portland because they don't know the lay of the land. Like you have to have a local lender. And other listing agents know that as well. It's like, oh, it's, Johnny B from right down the street. He controls his own processors. He can get the appraisal workaround. So there's no issues across the board. Even though there's no contingencies, you want to make sure that this process is seamless as possible.
Yeah.
No hiccups. Even if there is no appraisal, like you don't want the buyer to get an appraisal that comes in low and then gets, dissatisfied going to closing.
Absolutely. And firsthand experience, we've dealt with all these things. You tell your buyers, call this lender. Most of these lenders are offering the same packages.
Right.
And we're talking about there are super value conscious consumers out here. We have all respect in the world for being value conscious, right? But saving like an eighth of a point for the loan that's never going to happen,
right? Exactly.
Ain't worth it.
No.
Okay, so you mentioned deadlines. So I guess let's talk about the deadline. I guess that's the first thing that's going to come up in this situation. So you're a consumer, you're out here with your agent, you just saw the house you absolutely want to buy. So the first question that the agent needs to do is find out if there's a deadline. So what I'll say is that there are a lot of different ways you can handle the deadline. If an agent will specifically tell you, and maybe put it in writing somewhere in the MLS, that seller will not look at offers until, let's say, 7 p.m. on Tuesday, if you can know that for sure, then maybe you have a comfort level maybe you have time to do a pre-inspection. Maybe you have time to work on something else before you go directly to the computer to write the offer, right?
Right.
But we've also seen that these deadlines can shift, right?
On a regular basis. And that's one of my questions for you is, so we've had situations come up where you set the deadline, like 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, but then we have a really aggressive buyer agent that comes through and says, I don't care about the deadline. And I see what you have in the remarks. I'm going to give you 10% over list price, but I want a response within 12 hours, 24 hours.
Right. So, yeah, that happens. I've certainly done that as well.
As a buyer agent.
Yes. So that's what I'm saying. You have to read the situation. And so let's say from the buyer's perspective, as a buyer, if you're listening, if you're a buyer of real estate right now, that's a question to ask your agent to say, okay, I understand they have a deadline. Can we just go ahead and push this forward now? And, you're going to have to follow whatever your realtor's advice is on that. But I can say that for the most part, if I'm given any sort of green light, I will push the offer through. If it makes sense for us to go ahead and put it all on paper and be aggressive, then I'll do it. Have you done that as well?
We have done that before, yes.
Yeah.
And we usually let the listing agent know ahead of time. We're coming in at 10% over list price now.
But you're saying 10%, but just as a random
number, right? We're coming. Whatever the number is, we're coming in 10% over list price now. If you don't respond within 24 hours, you want us to wait to the deadline, then we're going to probably start at like 3 to 5% over, escalating up to our max,
with an escalation.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So we've all experienced this on both the listing and buying side, that sometimes the deadline doesn't mean the deadline. And being aggressive, as I always like to say, we go pedal to the metal.
Right.
And buyers get enthusiastic about this too. Especially when they're enthusiastic about the house and you say, no, we're going hardcore on this. They like that.
Right.
They enjoy this. It can be thrilling, and it doesn't always work out. And sometimes you do end up, they really do not want to look at your offer. Or they'll look at it and they'll say, thanks, but we're going to wait till the deadline. So there's still the deadline. You can go, retender the same offer or adjust your offer or however you want. Maybe you have time to do an inspection. I don't know.
Maybe. And then you have as the listing agent, when that does happen, like, what do you put in the remarks? What do you say to the other people that you've already told? We had a situation come up recently. It was a house in Brookland. Mm-hmm. We set a deadline, 3 o'clock on a Tuesday. We had the open house on Saturday, Sunday, a ton of showings, like 25 showings within 3 days. We were telling people deadline. But then you had the really aggressive offer that came in, mm-hmm. Which is a lot more than the seller anticipated. And yes. They were the ones that directed the ship there. They were like,
the seller is the decider.
Yeah, we're signing off. Let's be done with it. I mean, I told them to go 50,000 over on the list price. So they were already like gung ho, like, oh, wow, we're getting all this action. So they ended up getting 150K more than what they originally wanted.
Yeah.
So they were driving that boat, but then making that phone call is just as difficult to the other agents that you've told.
You've already told.
Yeah, 3 p.m. was the deadline. Like, what do you mean, Brent? You told me 3 p.m. I had a home inspection scheduled.
Well, every agent handles that bad news differently, right?
Right.
There have been times when I've certainly, like, you don't know that you've got it or not. And then you get the email and your buyer was, very excited about it. You were excited about it. Maybe it was a big deal. Maybe it was like 2 million, 2.5 million. It's hard to say, right? But what I'd say to that is I've definitely just responded like before, like, okay, thanks, because you got to move on to the next one.
Right.
It's the conclusion has been made that you are not getting it. And occasionally though, we've had it come back to us, right? So if you, especially for the buyer's agent, if you show that like you're upset or you get rattled in these situations where you didn't get it and you feel like things didn't go your way for some other random reason, just remember that not everything's done till it's done. And like I said, we've definitely had deals come back to us, even after multiple offer situations, being like the number 2 or number 3 buyer in the position. So
exactly, and I think that's what we always do is we send out a blanket email to each one of the losing agents. And it's like, great offer. The competitive landscape is unbelievable here in Washington, D.C., but you were a very close second.
Yeah.
The winner was all cash, no contingencies, went sky high, way above than what you were ever going to go. So at least that gives them a glimmer of hope that, hey, maybe it will come back to me.
Yeah.
Even though they were like dead last.
Yeah. Well, all right. Continuing on here with multiple offers. So we have a major factor in a multiple offer situation is, what are you going to pay for this listing? It's got multiple offers. They put a list price on it. What I would say about the list price for a lot of these things is I wouldn't use the term arbitrary, but it is sort of arbitrary in a way. But from the buying perspective, from the buyer's perspective and the buyer's agent perspective, who you're working with, if you're the consumer, you have to be aware of the most recent market. And when I say most recent, I mean like weeks, not 6 months, definitely not a year. You have to know what sold for what, because you have to know like where people are really aiming on the high end. If listings in this area that are, let's say it's a 4-bedroom house in Northwest DC, and you know that things that are being listed around 1.7 to 1.8 are selling for 2.1 to 2.3, that's probably where you're really looking. You're looking to spend 2.1 to 2.3 on this house if you can see that there's other data showing that.
Right.
And then in terms of escalations, how high do you write an escalation? How do you gauge like exactly what the top number is? Like, what do you tell your buyers in those situations?
So I have like a stock answer that I'm telling everybody. And this goes back even to like when I first started, but the couple that I just started working with this morning, like I told them, they're in a very tight market. I'm like, you're in probably the most competitive landscape in all of the nation, right? They want a fee simple house, 3 bedroom, 3 bath, under 1.5 in upper Northwest. Like
Sure.
That's very hard to find.
Market.
I pulled the only things I could pull them were, there were 9 places in all, like 5 different zip codes.
Mm-hmm.
So what I tell them is, look, you're going to be looking to pay 10 to 20% over the list price, right?
Yeah.
That's the start. But then I always have this love it, like it, leave it strategy. And I'll give them comps to support whatever they're looking at. But if you're looking up to 1.5, let's say a house comes on the market for 1.3, I'm like, all right, so you love it under 1.3, maybe you love it under 1.4. You like it up to 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you get to the top of that like it part, you can go either way.
Mm-hmm.
So if it goes $1 over, you're ready to leave it. So it's love it, like it, leave it.
Yeah.
And I let them fill in the blanks. I'll give them comps supporting, like you just said, not months, but like the last 2, 3, 4 weeks of data in that niche market, and let them fill in the blanks. But I don't want to be screamed at because I told them you should go to 1.6, and then they didn't get the house. I'm the one that told them 1.6.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have to be comfortable getting it or losing it at whatever number that is.
Yeah, I've definitely. I mean, of course, buyers have their limitations. I mean, if they can't go any higher than a certain number based on their qualifications, I mean, there's a limit, right?
Right.
So you just have to work within the confines. But yeah, I don't know that I've had any experiences recently where I helped a buyer write an escalation and I was just way off. It was really more based on like a limitation, because we're starting to get a sense when you walk into these houses, like if the kitchen was renovated in the last, let's just say 10 years, if the bathrooms are clean,
right,
you know right away that, oh my God, this is going to be mobbed. It's just amazing.
Yes.
And we're talking about in DC, we're talking about escalations of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the asking price in a lot of these cases. One data point I saw was I was looking for detached house comparables in Northwest DC up to around 2.5 million recently, and the average list to sale price, or excuse me, sale to list price was 107%. That means there were some of those that were definitely over that,
Right.
and maybe some that were closer to list. But 107%, I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of actual money in those price ranges. So that's just a data point. That's just an average. So it's just tricky to gauge. It's really tricky.
Do you give them a number? Do you tell them a number? Or
A
what
top
they,
number?
Yeah, they say, hey, Max, what would you pay for this? Or what do you
Oh,
recommend?
I like your method of like the, what is it?
Love it, like it, leave it.
Love it, like it, leave it. My thing is more, I look at price brackets. So I look at let's just arbitrarily say something's listed for 1.7. I look at it and I go, would I have listed this for 1.7? And if I'm thinking like, yeah, all day I knew that because I know that we would get 20
Right.
offers on it, then I immediately know that would I have listed it for 1.9? Would I have listed it for 2? And so I just sort of start working it in my mind, and then I explain that to the buyer. Where could I have listed this to still get action? And then in somewhere through my experience, you learn from your experience,
You know.
and from also understanding the market. I go to a lot of broker open houses still. I go preview stuff all the time because I love doing those TikToks, and I just like going to properties and seeing things. If they're easily accessible, I'll go see it. And you know the properties. You know, like, whoa, this sold for 2.1, this sold for 2.6. So you have to kind of learn what those brackets really mean now. And it'll all change. I mean, everything changes all the time, and you get used to that.
Right.
And so like I said, I know like it could easily be this. It could easily be this. If someone goes to this, that might be a little crazy. Maybe that's where you need to be.
Yeah.
They're crazy. And that's kind of how it's been.
I think you have to know the client's intent for the home as well.
Sure.
Is it short-term parking here for 2 to 4 years? Is
Right.
it their forever house? And this is, oh my God, I got to be here for the rest of my life. It's a legacy home.
Hey.
So you've got to really know the client as well.
Yeah. And sure. And that can also vary in terms of what their tolerance is for
Right.
aggression. But unfortunately, it's not a time to be not aggressive right now. That's just today. One other thing I want to say about escalation clauses. So we're talking about escalations. We're talking about like how high to go, but the amount of money that you will specify in the escalation clause, which is the increment. So that means the amount of money that you are willing to go over the next best offer in order to beat them, using air quotes. Because it's like, I have to beat someone to buy a house. It's kind of crazy. But when you're talking about increments, how do you decide on the increment? Like, so let's say it's a $1.5 million house. Like, are you looking at like a 1% increment, or is it more than that? Like, what's the right kind of level of aggression on the increment too?
We usually do for $1.5 million. It's not 1%. I mean, we're either like 5 or 10, maybe 15,000 increments, which would be 1%. But I think we kind of hover around 5 to 10,000, and then if you're like 500,000 and below, maybe $1 million below,
okay,
it's like $2,500. But I mean, it's very interesting, right? Because we won one. It was this year or last year, but the agent called again. It's the agent relationship. They're called like, Brent, we want to work with your offer, but your multiplying factor is only like $2,500.
Yeah.
You know, can you go to 5,000 and you guys will get it? And I'm like, sure. You know, go ahead and strike it up.
Sure. Well, that's lucky that they came back to you to give you that opportunity.
Exactly.
That doesn't always happen. You know, I guess in terms of strategizing, but again, that's a lucky anecdote. In terms of strategizing, you really, as the buyer, you need to consider making the strongest possible offer that you can on the first shot, because that you might not get that call back.
Exactly.
So, I mean, not everyone's Brent Jackson, right? Not everyone's going to get a call. So
you'd be surprised. There's a lot of Brent Jacksons out there.
There's a lot of Brent Jacksons. So I would say, so my answer to my own question on the increment is, I'm more aggressive than that. If I'm in like anything in like the 1 million plus category, I'm looking at like at least 15,000, if not more, because I need to make sure that the seller knows that my buyer means business. Like they mean like, So maybe there's another buyer. The next buyer down is a cash buyer, or is a 50% down payment, or is just showing more cash. And my buyer is only putting 20% down, or maybe 10%. Who knows, right? Like, there's great loans out here right now. You need to show them that, like, I mean it. I want to pay you this much more to make that other person go away. And yes, those are bigger chunks of money. But in this market, it's the difference between yes and no.
That's smart.
So that's the way I look at it.
That's
and
why
you know who
Max
taught me
Raven.
that was Jonathan Taylor, who we want to have on our show. Hopefully he'll come on soon.
Yes.
But no, Jonathan's always been about like the big increments.
He told me once, I mean, this was, again, he plays in a different space than we do, but I think he was saying like 50 or 100,000.
Oh yeah.
We've
written some big ones. Yes.
Yeah.
Depends on what you're doing.
Yeah. It's like I'm saying, it's a different space than what we're used to playing in. It's not our sandbox.
Well, we wrote one today that was 2 million, and we just straight up wrote just no escalation. It was just 2.2. And so I'm hoping I open my email when we get out of here and we got that. But I mean, it didn't sound like we were. I don't even know.
Right.
It's kind of crazy. All right. Part 4. I guess we're on part 4. Contingencies. Obviously, no contingencies, right? You cannot give us contingent offer in a multiple offer situation, but that's not always true either. Like, let's just start with that though. Let's just say no contingencies. And what does no contingencies mean? If you're buying a house, it means there's no financing contingency, meaning even if you are getting financing, you're not making it contingent on the approval of the financing or the commitment of the financing or the appraisal. Part 2 is a trip. I mean, that's an obvious one. Do you have anything else to say about financing?
No.
Not really. I mean, it's like you're just saying, here's cash, give me the house.
You're confident that you're going to be able to close.
Yeah.
Without,
And if you have a crappy lender,
yeah,
and they miss that deadline, okay, we got a problem.
Exactly.
So that's why you need that lender, the smart local lender. Inspections. This is a tough one in this kind of market. People are doing pre-inspections. A pre-inspection is when a buyer or their agent will get the inspector into the property before they've even written the offer. This is a very common thing in multiple offer situations right now. In fact, whenever I talk to new buyers, I tell them all this stuff up front. I say, no matter what section of the market they're in, price range, or what they're looking for, condo, house, anything, I always say, this is what's going to happen to you. Like, it'll be rare if this doesn't. So I tell them about the whole inspection thing. So now we're realtors and we're bound by our code of ethics because we are members of the Realtor Association. We have to explain to people that we always recommend a home inspection. But there are cases now where you won't have time to actually do a home inspection on a property. You won't have time to get a pre-inspection done if the deadline is tomorrow. So how do you explain this to buyers now if they're worried about like any aspect of a home? Like what have you been able to tell people? So
what I tell people, and again, this is speaking from experience, but I'm like, and I'm pretty straightforward with people too. I'm like, you will lose this house by putting in any of the contingencies you just mentioned.
Straight up.
Yeah, if you get through the multiple offer deadline and there's no offers, then maybe you can throw out one of the 3. But for all 3 of those, even the inspection, when I've bought a house, and I bought 10 houses over the last 12 years here in Washington D.C.
I need to get on that track, but go ahead.
We've never had one home inspection, one appraisal, or one financial contingency, because when you know you just know you're going to buy the house.
You're buying the house.
So that's what I tell people. But I'm not you, you're not me. You have to be comfortable with your decision.
Right.
But I can tell you that you will lose this house if you put in any of these 3 contingencies.
So that's perfect right there. What I've also, I try to appeal to the logic, okay? That's pure logic. If you don't do this, then you won't get this.
Right.
Period. There's no better logic than that. The further side is when there are 9 pre-inspections on a property. So 9 other people, I'm just using this 9 as a random number. I heard this the other day. There was a house in Northwest DC. The agent said there were 9 pre-inspections. I'm like, first of all, how is there enough time for 9 inspectors to go and like tinker around with the panel box? So if you know that 9 people have done home inspections, 9 different inspectors, 9 of the same sort, I don't care, and they're still all putting in offers, then logically you can tell yourself this house is not a disaster. It's definitely a place where someone would want to buy it. Maybe 9 people want to buy it. So if I am also interested in buying it, then I can not worry about the inspection. It's been inspected.
Right.
So that's all I wanted to say, was appealing to the better logic of that notion.
And I think sometimes the experienced buyer will know more than the buyer just coming,
For sure.
the first-time home buyer, right? Like
Yeah.
first-time home buyer, they might need to lose a couple. They need to put in all the contingencies to make sure they're comfortable, and then they keep losing. And then it's like, all right, now I'm going to play ball. I'm going to waive all my contingencies and go crazy
Sure.
on an offer. And we've
Yeah.
had a few buyers. I'm sure you have too. I think one buyer, I think he ended up spending maybe like $3,000, like 6 different inspections. It starts to add up
Mm-hmm.
because they're not inexpensive, and then time consuming too, because you're there for an hour to 2 hours at the property.
I'm rolling my eyes. All I can say is, and I'm not, look, we work for a living. I'm not saying like, you know, we don't spend hours doing things that we don't like. Obviously that's work. But some of these inspections, it's like, we know you're writing an offer.
Right.
We know you like the house. It's in the location you want. What difference does the inspection make at this point? So you might find out that there's a broken shower diverter, or that the roof is 10 years old. I mean, what are you
Anti-tip device on the stove.
Yes. Yeah. The anti-tip bracket.
Right.
If you know, you know. So anyway, inspections. I just love what you said. If you try to put an inspection contingency in, you're not
lose.
getting it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then again, speaking from experience, I think that goes a long way with buyers.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we've done. You bought
Practice
many
what you
houses.
preach.
We've all bought homes before. We've helped other people buy homes. We've seen just about everything you can see, especially with the kind of housing stock that we're used to. These are all houses that were built like a lot of the housing stock in DC is older. It's 1800s, 1900s. It's been renovated over the last, like, you know, various renovations in the last 50 years. Maybe it's a newer renovation. What do you hope to find?
Yeah.
Right.
And you can get you can see the eyeball test if you walk the property. Because as listing agents, if it's a good listing agent, you've done a really good job of cleaning it up and you're making it showcase the best that it can be. So when you go through there, you're not seeing like water damage or foundation cracks.
Sure.
And there's no roof leak, and you can open up the utility clause and see, you know, condition of the HVAC and the water tank, things like that.
So I guess to finish up, beyond all of these main points how to write the shut it down offer, are there any extra things? Like, because I always get these questions like, you know, should I write a letter to the seller? Like, what about stuff like that?
We've stopped doing the letters, and the letters might be frowned upon now. I mean, I know they're frowned upon in certain
jurisdictions. They say they don't allow.
Yeah, just, you know, fair housing and things like that. So as a listing agent, like, I don't want to see the letters. I will not present them to the sellers because I don't want to get stuck in some fair housing lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen too much, but I've heard of crazy stories like offering the seller like hard to get tickets or vacations or paying the seller's closing cost.
Yes.
Which to me is a little odd because, well, why wouldn't you just go up more?
Pay, right.
On the
it's all in the
escalation.
net somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like sweeteners, I guess. I like the idea of like, we'll give you our vacation house in Rehoboth Beach for a week if you'll take, you know. But again, it all comes down to really money.
Money.
So anyway.
But if you knew the seller, I mean, like for me, I'm trying to think, you know, if you gave me floor seats to the Golden State Warriors and the Wizards, well, that's, and, you know, apples to apples, like,
right.
Okay, that might.
You had to get sports in there somewhere.
I think you just had, yes.
Yeah, it's totally random. So I guess it depends on the buyer too, right? If the buyer has something creative that they can think of that they want to do, maybe that gives you the inside edge, right?
What's the craziest thing you've seen or done as a buyer agent, or even as a listing agent? Did you see in the contract? It's like, really, the buyer put that in there or wanted to put that in there?
To be honest, I've heard these stories that you're talking about, and I'm sorry for our listeners. I don't have anything that creative. It's always come down to all the things we just talked about. You know, who's involved, the strength of the buyer, the strength of the offer, the price, the contingencies, and, you know, sometimes you just get that sixth sense feeling about how things are going to go in any situation. You can tell, like, just by it's funny, as a listing agent, you can tell just by the way the offer was written up and how it was emailed to you, whether there's a problem.
Right.
Isn't that weird?
Yes.
And I don't know. That's the way I advise my clients in those situations. So if I'm working with a buyer, I try to keep all of that same stuff in mind I would if I was on the other side. That I want everything to be like very direct. I want the communication to be direct. I want to communicate on the phone with the listing agent so that they have heard my voice, because the opportunity for them to remember me first is a lot higher.
You listen to the podcast?
Yeah. I mean,
here's a link to our podcast.
If they're not driving around listening to my podcast, they're going to get me on the phone. No, but seriously, like all of those little personal, like little things that you're doing as an agent help along the way.
Yeah, I mean, doing the phone call does go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're the listing agent, you especially if you know that you're in a multiple offer situation, like being courtesy to the agent community and answering the phone call and replying back, good or bad, just being responsive.
Well, I would say I've definitely made that mistake before. I can't remember how many years ago it was, but I was in a multiple offer situation working with as a buyer's agent, and I don't think I made that phone call. I think I just emailed everything and sent a couple texts, and I didn't get it. I think we lost anyway, like for real lost.
Right.
And I called the agent and I said, hey, can you give me a little background on like where we stood on that one? And he's like, well, first of all, you never called me. And I said, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. I was like,
that's old school.
Yeah. Well, I think it was an old school agent. And I said, I apologize. What else can you say? But I apologize. There's no excuses, right? For not being personal and not being professional.
Right.
So
wow,
that agent was right. So, but again, that's why we've been doing this so long. We've seen it. We've learned these things firsthand. Yeah, that's about all I got on multiple offers. I mean, do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, we, you can recommend a shut it down offer, but I think at the end of the day, the client has to be willing to shut it down.
Yeah.
And all we can do is speak from experiences on what we've seen in the past and try to guide them to the right decisions. But at the end of the day, it's their decision on what they want to waive, if anything, and how high they want to go on the price. We can show them all the comps in the world, but they have to be comfortable with the decision that they make.
Absolutely.
And then we're just there guiding the ship and talking to the other side. Surprising, when you have relationships like we do, the other side will call us on a regular basis and be like, hey, look, we know you, we like you, we want to work with you. Can your buyer get to X? No, our buyer can't get to X, but at least we get the right to call our buyer like, hey, look, you can have the property at this price. Sure. Are you willing to go there?
Yeah.
I just can't do it.
Yeah.
So then we call them back like, unfortunately, we're stuck at where we are.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening to our episode about multiple offers. All we can tell you is your agent is a huge advantage for the start. Your lender's your partner too. Escalation clauses. Be aware of what else is selling for what in the immediate market. And don't be shy on an escalation factor either. Aim high.
Do your homework.
Do your homework.
Know the market frontwards and backwards. And if you don't or need help, ask your agent.
Yep. Contingencies, home inspection. Good luck getting a home inspection contingency. You're not going to get one probably in multiple offer situation. Timing for a pre-inspection. If you have time, do it. Also follow your agent's advice. And then, yeah, that's about it.
It's good stuff.
It's good stuff.
We'll see if we have the same topic next year. If it's like, how do you get an offer?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, in a year from now, I'll be like, so what do you do when you haven't had an offer in 6 months?
Yeah.
And we're all in a bunker somewhere. Oh, well. Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you again.
Thanks for listening to Keyed In with your hosts, Max and Brent, unlocking the minds of the industry's top real estate professionals. For more information on selling your home, find us online at KeyedInPodcast.com. Remember to subscribe to Keyed In on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Keyed In Podcast, at Rabin Max, and at Brent E. Jackson. And follow Max on TikTok at MaxwellRabin_properties.